Hi friends, today we are going to discuss the following topics. One is related to GS1, two topics are related to GS2 and two more topics are related to GS3. In the first topic, in the context of cyclone Amphan and cyclone Nisarga, it is of interest to know that of the total cyclones hitting in the coastal regions of India, on an average 4 out of 5 hit the eastern shores. That means the cyclones from Bay of Bengal are more than the cyclones originate in Arabia which reach the coast. Okay, why we see more cyclones in Bay of Bengal than in Arabian Sea? The first reason is sea surface temperature. You all know that the ideal temperature to form the cyclone is around 25 to 27 degrees Celsius. Bay of Bengal experiences such temperatures, whereas Arabian Sea temperatures are little lower. So when temperature is higher, it feeds the moisture to give the cyclonic storm. So this is one important reason. Temperatures are higher in Bay of Bengal region compared to Arabia. Second thing, the lower vertical wind shear. Lower vertical wind shear means the change in wind speed as per the altitude. This change in wind speed as per the altitude is less in Bay of Bengal region compared to Arabian region. So Arabian Sea region. So this is one more favorable factor for formation of more cyclones in the Bay of Bengal region. Okay, which would formation and reaching the coast. The third one is additional influx from the South China Sea. The remnants of typhoons, from the South China Sea, they carry forward to the Bay of Bengal. So the additional moisture will be fed through those typhoons remnants. That is also one more reason. Whereas in Arabian Sea, the cyclones are mostly their own formations and they also generally move northwest away from India's west coast. So this is not only less number of cyclones forming that region, but also the direction is towards northwest instead of towards the India's west coast. That is the reason the most cyclones which hit the India are towards the India's east coast compared to the west coast. In the recent news we have been hearing that landfall term. The landfall means when the cyclone hits the coastal region of the land. When the cyclone hits the land, it is called landfall. The cyclones originate in the water and they move towards the coast. The moment they hit the coast, it is called landfall. Now, second topic, it is in the context of India's parliament not able to meet because of the social distancing norms to be followed during COVID-19. This article came up in Hindu. The author's main proposition here is Parliament should be immediately convened considering the extraordinary circumstances. What are the arguments extended for immediate convening of Parliament is the basic rationale of the parliamentary form of government is regular scrutiny. It has that regular scrutiny is being compromised currently. Okay, so that is bedrock of the parliamentary form of government as per the author. That is why immediate convening is required. Second point, currently in the context of COVID-19 economic crisis, the government has come up with Atmanirbhar Bharat Abhiyan package and government is spending huge money towards that. So expenditure by the government has to be scrutinized by the parliament, and also issues related to pandemic, the crisis being faced by the poor and migrant labor. All those issues are of immediate importance which needs to be discussed and debated in the parliament. Okay, the third, till now we have discussed points related to scrutiny. Under the scrutiny we have discussed 2 points. Now we are going to discuss with respect to lawmaking. Under the lawmaking, currently there is no specific law to handle these pandemic crisis like situations. That is why government has come up with so many subordinate legislation measures through Disaster Management Act. But that Disaster Management Act is not well framed to handle these kind of pandemics and diseases. Okay, epidemics. epidemic and pandemic kind of diseases. So there is a urgent need to form such kind of law. Many countries have recently formulated the law with a sunset clause. So that is why it is very much important. Next, the subordinate legislation. The 5,000 circulars by the central and state governments in this period, it is very huge number. Whether that subordinate legislation is in spirit of are in spirit with the constitution, or if they are inconsistent, that needs to be examined by the parliament. So these are the main arguments put forward by the author. You can use these arguments even to discuss the effectiveness of parliament when such kind of question comes in the examination. So these arguments can be put forward even in the general scenario, but here they are tailored to pandemic. Then why, if there is such an urgent need, why the parliament is not able to meet? As I told, they have to respect the social distancing norms, and you may ask, they can conduct the virtual conference. No, yes, virtual conference can be conducted, but some people are citing the reasons of confidentiality. Let us see whether they are true obstacles to convening the parliament. There is one obstacle, that as per the rules of the house, committee should meet within the precincts of the house. I mean, within the parliament environment, within the precincts of the house, they are supposed to meet. But even this can be changed from the permission of the speaker alone. For this, no need of amendment is required. So speaker himself can make that changes. So convening of parliament is not required to effect these changes. So if such thing is there, then it becomes chicken and egg problem. But that kind of obstacle is not there. No kind of parliamentary law amendment is required to convene virtual convening of the parliament. I think this point is clear. No law amendment is required to convene the parliament virtually. So in fact, there are enabling clauses already in the constitution and rules of the parliament. One is, the president may summon parliament to meet at such time and place as he thinks fit. At such time and place, that place is not a physical place alone, it can mean even virtual place. So that is not an obstacle. In fact, it is enabling virtual convening. The second thing is, the rules of procedures of both houses require the secretary general to issue summons to each member specifying the date and place for a session of the house. So here also, place means physical and virtual. So both are these are enabling clauses to convene the parliament in virtual conference mode. So then what can be done now? I mean, what can be done to convene the parliament? So while respecting the social distancing norms. So already there is a body called Interparliamentary Union, which is a global forum, which documented the practices of the other countries, how they are doing the parliamentary sessions. Some countries are doing physically with less number of people attending. Some kinds of people are attending entirely virtually, and some kinds of countries are following. Some few people are attending physically, few people are attending virtually, so that the seating capacity and distancing norms can be respected. So now, whatever we have discussed, you can discuss as part of effectiveness of Indian Parliament. If there is a broader question of effectiveness of Indian Parliament, you can add extra 1-2 points related to COVID-19 also, because after COVID-19, everything, at least COVID-19 dimension, is going to be there for few more years. So it is better to add that perspective in your answers, whatever may be their subject. Okay, then why India needs Australia? So in the context of the virtual meet between the Indian head and Australian head, this topic is of importance. So in this context, why India needs Australia? We have earlier seen that why India needs Africa. So whenever you are dealing with any country, this framework is very important. You should understand why some other country is of importance to India. This framework you should adapt for any kind of country. Okay, so why India needs Australia? One is Indian Ocean region. In Indian Ocean region, to thwart the growing aggression of China, we need cooperation from the multiple countries. And when USA's political trajectory is uncertain, when Trump's policies are a little bit whimsical, so we should need the support from many other countries. Australia is one such country where we can count upon, because it lies in the southern Pacific region at the intersection of the Pacific and at the south of the intersection of the Indian Ocean and South Pacific. So Australia is very important in that context, and Australia also has so many natural resources which are of importance to India, like coal and uranium. And third, huge reservoirs of strength in terms of higher education, scientific and technological research. Australia has best practices with respect to higher education and scientific and technological research. We can learn from them. And also Australia's intelligence expertise can be is valued across the world, so we can learn from their intelligence expertise, which can be used to counter terrorist threats. So that is one important thing. And we can also leverage Australia to forge deep political, economic and security connections with the ASEAN. So we can use Australia as a leverage to increase our cooperation with the Asian countries. For example, Australia has a deeper ties with Indonesia, and Indonesia is at the intersection of Indian Ocean and Pacific Ocean. Those lanes of communication, it is sitting at the juncture of Indian Ocean and Pacific Ocean. So we, to increase our engagement with Indonesia, we can leverage Australia. And also Indian diaspora, around 7 lakh people are living in Australia. The security and the interests of the Indian diaspora is important to India. If we take care of them, in turn they will help us to forge deep connections with Australia. So that is why India need Australia. So what are the opportunities for engagement with Australia for India? Already we are common members in many groupings. They are G20, East Asia Summit, Indian Ocean Related Association, Regional Cooperation Association, and Quad. Quad is nothing but USA, India, Australia and Japan. That is called Quad. Four is called Quad. So all these 4 forums where we can engage actively. And there are multiple other forums also, but these are the main important things. And a host of emerging issues on which we can converge our interests. For example, India, as we discussed yesterday, India is becoming the chairman of WHO Executive Board, and 5G related technology, strengthening the International Solar Alliance, disaster and climate change related resilience, how to handle these disasters and climate change related issues. So all these are common areas of interest for India and Australia. So we can discuss on these issues. But short term, there are some obstacles because of COVID-19 induced downturn. The countries are more becoming inward because of the travel restrictions and the other restrictions. So short term, there will be less engagement in terms of bilateral commerce. So I told you that Indian Prime Minister and Australian head is engaging through virtual summit. So what is expected is it is expected that they may sign the military logistics support agreement, or discussions towards signing of military logistics support agreement may take place. In addition to this, what more can be done, especially in the context of security in the Indian Ocean region? These what more can be done are heavily centered on the security related things, not on the other aspects. So keep that in mind. So in the security front, to strengthen India's position in Indian Ocean region and to thwart China, these are the important things to be done. One is we have to go for series of overlapping bilateral and multilateral platforms to limit the dangers of growing geopolitical imbalance in the Indo-Pacific region. So for example, India, Australia, together they can do multiple military exercises and also naval exercises. India, Australia and Indonesia, because I already discussed about this thing. So India, Australia, Indonesia, trilateral exercises can be conducted to secure the lanes of communication, to secure free flow through those lanes of communication. And India, Australia, Japan are already engaged in diplomatic level. This can be taken up to the higher level, to the level of trilateral naval exercises. And France and Britain are also interested in the Indian Ocean region. France already has some islands in the Western Indian Ocean and South Pacific. So India, Australia, France can also engage that level. And UK has a 5-power defense agreement which is related to Indian Ocean region. In the 5-power defense agreement, UK, Malaysia, Singapore, Australia, New Zealand, these are all part of that 5-power defense agreement. Australia can see how India can contribute to by engaging with FPDA. So till now we have discussed GS1 and GS2. Now we are quickly moving on to issues related to subsidies. This has come because one author has written in one of the editorials of the Hindu that we should encourage the direct benefit transfer instead of free electricity and subsidizing the water through in the form of goods. So he is advocating for the direct benefit transfers. In this context, I am discussing broadly what are the issues related to subsidies by giving them in the form of the goods. These arguments I have taken from 2015 economic survey. The then chief economic advisor Arvind Subramanian has quoted very exhaustively what are the problems with respect to goods related by giving subsidies in the form of goods. One is the regressive. What is regressive in the context of economic policy means when any economic policy benefits the rich more than the poor, then such kind of economic policy is called regressive. For example, if you are giving electricity subsidy, a farmer who is having large land holdings will have many pump sets. So his amount of benefits will be more compared to the amount of benefits a farmer would get by having only 1 or 2 pump sets. So obviously in a way it is helping the rich farmer more than the poor farmer. So such kinds of policies are called regressive. So by giving the subsidies in the form of goods, it would be regressive. Then leakages, there could be some leakages due to corruption, then that is lost to exchequer. Not only that, had you used those funds in a effective manner, you could have seen the development in another sector. So opportunity cost is also a matter of thing here. And there could be market distortions due to inefficient use of limited resources. For example, water and power are crucial resources. When people are not paying due attention to optimal use of those resources, people will exploit the subsidies. I mean, since government is giving them for free, they don't have incentive to conserve them. So these kinds of by misutilizing those resources, there will be shortages in the other sectors. So other sectors will get affected, and because of which the cost will increase, input cost will increase because power is one of the inputs, because of which the output goods cost will increase. In a way, again poor will get affected because the price increase in the market will affect the poor only. So these kind of market distortions will be created. Then threat to environment. Groundwater levels are falling. As per NASA survey, every year 0.3 meters ground table level is falling in India. So that is threat to environment. Also, some discoms are misusing this subsidy thing because they are projecting the losses as consumption in farm sector, which is not acceptable. But is everything fine with the direct benefit transfer? So I told you that providing subsidies in the form of goods is not effective. So is by doing direct benefit transfer, can we overcome all the evils? It is not so. There are some counter arguments also, because when you provide cash to the poor people through direct benefit transfer, if due to some crisis, if there is sudden surge in the market and due to which the prices may go up. For example, the kg rice price may go up. Had you given some 20 rupees or some rupees to poor, but when the prices increase, they cannot afford that. Fluctuation of prices, and poor people cannot afford that. Then also some people may use it for consumption of alcohol rather than buying the basic staple food. So this may affect. So we have to address these constraints. For example, we may transfer it to female members account in the home. That may reduce the evils. So these are the counter arguments. So way forward is, for now essential goods are distributed through goods only, considering these market fluctuations. That is why PDS is there, public distribution system is there, and we have to bring in more reforms, and we have to go for the phased withdrawal of the things with more reforms in the financial inclusion and other stuff. Then we can deliver benefits through DBT effectively. So I am stopping here because I want to limit the video only to 20 minutes. We will discuss the remaining topics tomorrow. Thank you.